official time.
Whitbread's always the last to come, so leave the closest.
Yes, I know. Jamie spoke to me. He said he should be. He said he's not well, but he did say he might be here.
Chairman. I had apologies for lateness from him, but you'll hear
Oh.
that when I...
Fine. Fine.
But she's not in this part of the world, so it's no help to you. She's South East London.
lovely. I couldn't ever do anything like that.
No, it's quite hard. I was looking at it. Yeah, very proud of her.
Because it's more training than
Well, and she went to Cambridge as well, so it's 6 years. And now she wants to do more, which is another 5 years.
Right, it's 7 o'clock. Good evening, members, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of Area Planning Subcommittee East. I first have to read the following announcement. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or another use by such third parties. If you are seated in the lower public seating area, it is likely that the recording cameras will capture your image, and this will result in the possibility that your image will become part of the broadcast. This may infringe your human and data protection rights, and if you wish to avoid this, you should move to the upper public gallery. If I could, for the purposes of the webcast, introduce myself. My name is Councillor Paul Kesker and I am Chairman tonight. To my left is Councillor Heather Brady, who is my Vice Chairman. To her left is Jackie Lyther, an officer from Democratic Services. And on my extreme right, Natalie is dealing with the webcast tonight. Members may well have noticed, in fact, that we have no planning officers present tonight. But we do have 2 planning officers who will appear on the screens and whose names are underneath. I would say I'm going to be a voting chairman. Jackie, number 2 is advice to public and speakers. That's been done?
Yes, Chairman.
Thank you. Number 3, minutes. Members, the minutes of our last meeting were on pages 9 to 12 of the agenda. Do I have your approval to sign as a true record?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Number 4, apologies for absence.
Yes, Chairman. I have apologies from Councillors Bedford, Phillip, Rolfe, Janet Whitehouse and lateness from Councillor McIver.
One more.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Whitbread.
Thank you. Sorry. Can I apologise for Councillor Chris Whitbread for this evening? Thank you.
Is he coming late?
Not coming.
He's not
yeah,
coming.
Thank
right.
you.
Okay, thank you. Number 5 is declarations of interest. Members, do we have any declarations of interest for any item on the agenda tonight? No, thank you very much. Jackie, number 6 is any other business?
No, Chairman, no other business.
Thank you. Number 7 is to note the Epping Forest District Council Planning Policy Briefing Note from October 2021. Number 8 is site visits. Is any member going to ask for a site visit? Yes, Councillor Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to suggest a site visit on items 10 and 11. I'm aware there was one a number of years ago, but I'm aware that since that point there are a number of new councillors. If you don't know that area specifically, it's quite an unusual site in the way it kind of faces onto the forest, and also in terms of its general location and amenity. So I would recommend that. I don't know if anyone's willing to second me.
Thank you.
I will second that.
As a seconder. Right, members, I will explain in a moment how we have to deal with this, but a proposal has been made that we have a site visit before we consider this application. All those in favour, please show.
Sorry, I made that 7.
8? I didn't vote.
All right. I made it 7. Can you just put your
Can you
hands?
just show again? I think that was 1, 2,
1,
3,
2.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah, 8, Chairman.
Okay, those against? 2.
2, Chairman.
And abstentions? 3.
3, Chairman.
Right, I'm going to apologise, but if members call for a site visit before an application is considered and it is passed by the committee, we do not hear the application tonight, and officers will arrange for a site visit at a convenient time, if possible very often on a Saturday, because it's still dark quite early in the evenings, before we actually hear the application and consider it, but obviously that's to get it back to the committee at the earliest possible date. So my apologies for your coming along and not hearing it, but that is the way that the system works, and this will now go to a site visit first. Please do push the...
Can you tell me what constitutes a site visit? What is actually going to happen in that site visit?
Right, okay. A site visit is when arrangement is made for any or all of the councillors on the committee with a planning officer to attend the site and to see it and to see the surroundings. We do not engage in any discussion with the applicant or any objectors or anyone else on the site at that time. And then that enables the members of the committee to have full information before they consider the application. All right? So that's the system. In which case, members, item 9 on the agenda is deferred for a site visit.
No, 10 and 11. 10 and 11.
Sorry?
10 and 11.
I do apologise. It is 10 and 11. I do apologise. In which case, James Rogers, who was going to introduce this at some length, that will obviously have to be put off until hopefully our next meeting. Okay. Right, in which case we go back to item 9 on the agenda, which is application 0073/19, the land adjacent to Brook Cottage, School Lane, Abbess, Beauchamp and Berners Roading, Ongar. Anyone who knows the area will tell you it's nowhere near Ongar, but it still comes up as Ongar. So, Mr. Rogers, would you like to take us through this application?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, let me just share my screen. Okay, can you see that?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay. So yeah, as just described, we did have 3 items on tonight's agenda. We now have the single item, which is item 9, EPF 0073/19, which is land adjacent to Brook Cottage, School Lane, Abbess Roading. As you quite rightly say, this is nowhere near Ongar. It's in the village of Abbess Roading. This application was or has been held in abeyance because of the potential impact on the Epping Forest SAC. The proposed development is for the erection of 4 new homes and associated garaging. The proposal is before tonight's committee due to an objection from the parish council and at least one neighbour. A reconsultation has been undertaken and 2 further objections have been received from number 6, School Lane and Well Cottage, and those objections relate to parking, highways and flooding matters. Officers are recommending that planning permission is granted. So starting with the location, the application site is located on land adjacent to Brook Cottage at the southeastern end of the village of Abbess Roading. It is a rather small area of development. The village goes off the map to the north, and it's notable that there are bungalows opposite which front the road and are located directly adjacent to the site. And further to the east, there is an existing enclave of small bungalows as well. So turning to the aerial view, we can see the site at the moment is an open field, and it is within the boundaries of the Metropolitan Greenbelt. As noted, the development located near, excuse me, located nearby is this small area of bungalows, and this is a gap of about 40, excuse me, 40 metres from the edge of the site to this one. So turning to the images, this is a photograph of the site. It's got a closed boarded fence which is adjacent to School Lane. There is a small brick-built bridge over an existing divot, which is here, and there's a post and rail fence which surrounds it as well. So turning to the actual proposed development, the proposal is for the erection of 4 new dwellings and associated garages. It will be 2 sets of semi-detached dwellings, which will be set rather significantly further back from School Lane than say, Brook Cottage is. An approximate 14-metre gap from the eastern boundary, and there will be approximately 10 metres of rear garden left. 10 metres of rear garden provided for each of the new dwellings. The garages are shown as well, dotted around the site. It's worth noting that the area towards the front of the road, the existing trees and mature hedge row, that will be retained as part of the application as well. So turning to the proposed design, as I said, they are set well back from School Lane itself. They're not going to be overtly visible from public viewpoints. I think it's fair to say they're of a conventional design with gable roof elements and hips as well. And they're not dissimilar to the existing properties in the village as well. So turning to the proposed floor plans, this shows that the dwellings will provide 4-bedroom accommodation, which are all of a suitable size to provide a good standard of accommodation for new residents. And the proposed garages, relatively small scale, with a conventional hipped roof as well. So finally, turning to the proposed street scene, this is quite an interesting drawing because it shows, first of all, the proposed street scene with the hedgerow not shown in situ. And you can see the scale is not dissimilar from the adjacent Brook Cottage in terms of its ridge heights, overall bulk and mass as well. It is somewhat larger than the enclave of bungalows located to the east. But overall, in terms of design, in bulk and scale, it's not dissimilar. And then when we look at the proposed street scene with the hedgerow actually shown in the foreground, it's not overtly visible from the public views, albeit you can see the very top of the proposal, the roof, etc. Incidentally, it is proposed that the hedgerow and landscaping is maintained, is retained on the front as well, because it is an effective screen and will lessen its potential impact in the street scene. So I think in terms of the considerations for this application, the most important thing is to consider the impact on the Metropolitan Greenbelt. And I think it's fair to say that the government and our emerging local plan attach great importance to protecting Greenbelt land, and that inappropriate forms of development should be refused planning permission unless very special circumstances can be demonstrated to clearly outweigh the harm caused. There are, however, exceptions to inappropriate forms of development, such as the limited infilling within existing villages. So if I just go back on the slides to this, I think this is an important image when we look at this. So our emerging local plan defines limited infilling as a development of a small gap in an otherwise continuous built-up frontage. So whilst the local plan doesn't directly define it as such, Abbas Roding constitutes a village for the purposes of this policy, and case law has shown that local plan settlement boundaries are not determinative for the purposes of considering the exception. So really, the test of this application is whether or not this application infills an otherwise built-up frontage and whether it's limited. I think in this case it's clear to see that the application site does have development directly to its west, and it does have development over the road as well with these bungalows which front School Lane. I think it has to be acknowledged that there is a rather substantial gap between the edge of this site and the edge of these cottages here, Bass Cottages. But nevertheless, it still infills an otherwise area of built form. It follows the development of the bungalows on School Road, and whilst it doesn't infill all of the gap, it still would classify as a limited infill within the Greenbelt. So officers have concluded that it is not inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, and therefore very special circumstances are not required to justify it. So turning to the other considerations, the Tree and Landscape team have raised no objection, subject to conditions requiring the retention of these trees on the front of the site. As I said, they're an important screen, and also the planting of native species as well on the other boundaries. The Essex County Council Highway team have raised no objection, subject to conditions relating to vehicle parking and turning. And incidentally, a condition is also being proposed to require electric charging points for those parking spaces, and that is to do with the Epping Forest Special Area of Conservation. That's one of the measures that's required. Whilst the proposal is outside the zone of influence for recreational pressure, it could have an impact on air quality. However, now that we've got the air pollution mitigation strategy in place, and the applicant has agreed to pay the financial contributions required and to deliver the condition as I set out on the electric charging, amongst others, officers are recommending that planning permission is granted, subject to a legal agreement to secure those contributions and subject to the conditions as set out in tonight's agenda. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, the recommended decision is to grant permission subject to legal agreements. Who would like to start? Yes, Councillor Balcombe and then Councillor Hadley.
My first query would be, you talked about the properties to the right. They're not bungalows, they're actually houses. Secondly, as I understand it, I'm just trying to find my note here that I put down. And you called it an infill site. I would query that as well, because those properties were actually built under a special, what I'm going to call a licence, as their sheltered housing. So I can't quite see how it's an infill site. My second point would be the brook running through it and the flooding. And my third point is the road itself is so small and narrow. You've only got to drive down it, and there's not room to pass now, so the more traffic you put down there, the worse it's going to be.
Thank you. We do occasionally wonder whether Essex Highways actually go and see these sites or not before they comment. Anyway, Councillor Hadley and then Councillor
question,
Whitehouse.
Chair. While we're here, there's nobody objecting from the Parish Council. I thought the situation was if they do not turn up, then this is determined at the officer level. So why are we here?
Okay, thank you. Jackie?
If it was just the parish council alone with the only objectors, then they have to turn up. But if somebody else, like a neighbour or anybody, sent in objections, which I'm not sure, James, have they?
Yes, there are.
Yeah, then they don't have to turn up. It's just when they alone raise an objection and nobody else does, no other neighbours. But because neighbours have.
Yes? Okay, you're clear. Right. First of all, before we go on, Councillor McIver, do you have any declarations of interest?
None, Chairman.
Thank you.
Apologies for lateness.
Councillor Whitehouse.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, I think it does all come back to whether this is infill in the green belt. And I mean, I noted what was said about the importance of that aerial image, but I think if you zoom out on that aerial image a bit, you see quite how small the village is and actually quite how big that gap between the sheltered housing and the main village is in the context of the village as a whole. It's not a small gap, it's a substantial gap, and it's not a continuous built up frontage. I mean, that, to my mind, is where the frontage becomes discontinuous. And I think it really is stretching a point to call that infill, especially as no houses behind it or to one side of it. And, you know, I'll listen to the arguments, but, you know, it seems very clearly to me to go against the Greenbelt policy.
Okay, thank you. I'll go back to Councillor Balcombe, if I might, before we move on.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned Brook Cottage. The thing I meant to mention about that was actually built, as I understand it, on a brownfield site and not a green belt site. So that's how that actually became there. But I do understand that other things have actually been turned down on that site because it is in a green belt. And the last thing is that the Parish Council have raised with me today is they say trees have been removed there in the last 3 or 4 years to enable this to go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
As pictures show, yeah.
Right, Councillor Macready.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just wondering what the land is being used for at the moment. It probably doesn't bear any influence on what will happen, but just as a point of interest, thank you.
Mr. Rogers, do we have any information?
So the land at the moment is, it's certainly not residential curtilage for Brook Cottage. It's sort of, for want of a better phrase, it's fallow. It's sort of a scrub area of land, but it's certainly not, you know, previously developed land. It's certainly just a greenfield site.
Okay, thank you. Any other councillors? It does seem, oh, yes, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. I too have slight concerns about the infill. I think it's a discussion we've had many a times before, so I suspect that's going to be sort of certainly not grounds for refusal. However, I suspect it actually creates a potential infill site by the very nature of its position. I'd just like to come back on the road and the access. It's School Lane. Is there an operating school in the environment? I don't know, sorry, I apologise, I don't know the environment, but is that a historical term? I was just making sure that we weren't going to have construction traffic and school opening and closing at the same time. But is there an operating school within the area?
Right. I certainly don't know the answer to that. I don't know whether Mr. Rogers does.
My understanding is there is no operating school. There's an old school house, perhaps historically, but my understanding is that there's no operational school there.
Okay, that would be fine then. Thank you.
Right. Any other councillors? Yes, Councillor Brady.
Well, still on similar lines, really. The parish council say there is no public transport whatsoever. So I would have thought it's a fairly unsustainable site from that angle. If you're talking about proximity to services, to schools, to shops, to doctors, and we've been told that the road's very narrow, it seems to be a fairly unsustainable position to be wanting to build 4 new houses on a greenfield site.
Okay, Councillor Balcombe, you wish to come back?
I don't know the area.
Yes, I've just got another query actually. You brought it up, there's no public transport, but that actually brings it onto the lack of parking on the site at the moment. If you've actually got 4 houses there, I think are they 3 4-bedroom houses? I can't remember. I think they're 4.
3, I think, but Mr. Rogers, could you bring us up the site plan, please?
Yeah, bear with me a second. So it's 4-bedroom.
It's 4-bedroom, but one is a box room by the look of it, but it's very small. And the ground plan, so we can see the parking.
Yep. So remember, they've each got their own detached garage as well.
So there is a detached garage and a space in front of the garage for each house. Is that correct? Yeah.
That's right, and visitor parking space as well.
And parking spaces at the front. Yeah, Councillor Walker?
I was just going to say, there's only one visitor's parking space.
It looks like it.
So if you've got a 4-bedroom house, you're going to have 3 cars.
Yeah, depends
On
how many
today's
children
scale.
they've got
Yeah,
for a
on
start.
today's scale. Yeah, and parking down that road is a nightmare now, so... It's just
It often
another
amazes me when we drive out into Essex that there are whole villages without a single local shop or any other facility in them, and people have to travel for miles to get anywhere where they can buy a pint of milk even. But that's how it is. We can't do anything about that. Right, any other councillors? Well, I think it's fairly straightforward. I mean, we've heard the discussions. Is it an infill or isn't it? So the proposal is to grant permission with conditions. All those in favour, please show.
Six, Chairman.
1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Yep. Those against?
5, Chairman.
And abstaining?
3, Chairman.
Is that up to the total? If it does, and we've all voted, then in which case...
There's 14 members, but only 13 were allowed to vote. So Councillor McIver gave abstention, so I've got 14.
That's fine. Okay, that explains it. In which case, planning permission is granted. I apologise to Councillor McIver, he's arrived just in time for us to close the meeting in view of the fact that there was a request for a site visit for items 10 and 11, which are for the same premises in Epping. And consequently, we are going to be closing the meeting rather earlier than planned. It's good to see you, nevertheless. Yes, Councillor Morgan?
Going on about the site visit, is it not possible to organise the site visit or someone request the site visit before the meeting, because all these people were here?
I personally, I agree with you. We originally had site visits requested when the item came up, and we then said, no, that's not right. You should do it at the beginning of the meeting and not during the meeting, as it were, which is why there is a separate item on the agenda. But I agree with you, to have a request in the meeting at any point is not helpful. Our applicants and objectors have turned up thinking they're going to get this resolved. We would like to resolve it, but if it's voted on that we want a site visit, then that is what we must do. However, can we put a request? I'm not sure who else is on tonight. Graham Courtney is on tonight watching us. Perhaps he could bring this matter up with the Chief Planning Officer, that we ask for requests for site visits to come to the committee first. I'll let Graham come back to us first,
Yep,
and then come back to Councillor McIver.
Thank you, Chairman. I was actually just about to raise my hand. You came to me anyway. This is something that has been discussed. I can't recall whether you were at the chairman's meeting that we had a little while ago, and this was I think discussed then, that obviously members can and are encouraged, if they do feel a site visit is going to be necessary, to raise that beforehand, and obviously if possible we will arrange that before the meeting. I know it's not always possible for members to do that, and obviously it is still they are still able to request a site visit as has been done today, but certainly all members, please bear in mind, if you do feel that there is a site visit necessary, and we've got at least a sort of few days to try and organise it, then do let us know, and we will do our best to try and organise that, so we don't have this kind of delay.
Okay, but there isn't a requirement that it should be done in advance, is there?
No, it's a suggestion and an encouragement.
Okay,
yeah.
That's the next best thing. Particularly, I think, for ward councillors, if I might say so. Councillor Morgan, do you want to come back on that one?
No, I'm quite happy with that one, Chairman. The other thing was the acoustics are a lot better tonight. I'm sitting at the back here. But
If I could simply mention, I did raise the point that those who have hearing aids have to sit at the back. Otherwise, you don't pick up the loop. So Jackie has very kindly put the two of you at the back, and they put me in the middle. I'm not sure whether my loop's working, but that is a lot better. Councillor McIver, did you want to come in on that?
Councillor Morgan liked the acoustics, perhaps because I wasn't here, but I was just going to suggest, when I used to be a flight attendant, we used to have a group email about a week before the flight to say, does anyone want to do this? We're going to go to here or there. And it used to prompt people to bring up other matters prior to a flight. And I'm just wondering if, I appreciate it's any member can request a site visit, but that may prompt, if we had a group email just, you know, a week before a meeting, say, would anybody like to request a site visit? I just wondered if that might just be something we could do as a committee alone.
I don't disagree with you. If you could go to Jackie, but just say, perhaps you could tell us when the agenda for this committee, for any committee, is actually published.
Just what I was going to say. The agenda is published 10 days before. So really, is it not up to members to look at it and then, when it's published, and say, I think we should have a site visit for that, and then contact the relevant, the planning department or democratic services, and we can organise it. You know, like we can't be sort of, I don't know whose responsibility it would to be sending out emails.
Okay. All right. Councillor Hadley first. No.
In addition to that, I suggest maybe that if, you know, after you get the agenda and the plans, if people want a site visit, then the meeting should not occur until the site visit has occurred, has happened. So what comes first? I mean, people want a site visit, they need to go and look at the place, rather than saying you've got to do it by this date, because that's when it's going in front of the committee. Okay. Makes sense to me.
Tony Muckfield. Jackie?
Well, I believe that if you sort of looked at the agenda when it was published on a Monday or a Tuesday, and then you contacted the relevant, like, democratic services, we could arrange a site visit before the meeting the following Wednesday. If you can't attend it, then surely then you could go and look at it on your own. You know, if the planning officer gives you a date, this is when I can attend, but you can't attend it, then could you not go and look at it on your own?
Yes, yes, exactly. But I'm thinking more of the situation that I think Graham Courtney said, that the meeting would go ahead, even if you couldn't arrange that meeting, arrange the site visit. So the agenda would stay the same regardless of whether you had the site meeting or not.
The agenda's out.
Once an agenda has been published, it stands. Yeah. It's like you can't just say, oh, somebody wants a site visit, we can't arrange one before, so we'll take that off the agenda. It's been published. It's only if the applicant were to request that his application, he didn't want it.
Okay.
We can't make that decision.
We've got several other speakers here. I'm going to line you all up. Could I start off with Councillor Jones, then Councillor Balcombe? Did you want to come back as well? Yep, so Councillor Jones, then Councillor Balcombe.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just aware that I think this meeting is still being webcast. I'm wondering if we are veering towards items off the agenda, and perhaps this is not the best forum for the discussion about site visits to be continued. Whether it should be, we have got a meeting upcoming relatively soon with the chair and vice chairs of planning committees, whether it might be an idea to refer it back to that group. I know it was discussed at our previous meeting, but there is obviously still discussions to be had. I'm just wary that perhaps this isn't the best forum for the discussion, because it doesn't just impact this committee.
Certainly we can't make any decisions or scarcely make a recommendation, but I do agree with you, the place for this to be discussed is the meeting of chairman and vice chairman. Councillor Balcombe, and then I think it was Councillor Bolton.
Exactly the point I was going to make. That's just an interesting. How many members would you need for a site visit to agree, and how would you do that?
In the normal way, if a councillor, well, if any councillor asked for a site visit, and it's normal to have at least one supporting you, that would come to officers. Officers would then ask the chairman, and if the chairman says yes, that's agreeable, then it would take place. All right. Councillor, oh no, I'm going to go to Councillor Bolton next. He's been patiently waiting.
That was going to be my question anyway. It's interesting that these two applications are for the same site. If the first is agreed, do we still discuss the second application? So we have to discuss both, and then they have the choice as to how many they can build on the site.
It's an unusual situation,
Yeah.
but yes, there's
But
no
it is-
reason you can't stop
we will
people
still
putting in
discuss both.
multiple applications if they so wish.
Thank you.
Councillor Brady, do you want to come? I think
Yes,
we'll
yes,
close it
I'll have a
after
go.
that.
I was just going to say that always with site visits in the past, not everybody can make them. And so if you haven't been able to go on a site visit, listen very, very carefully to those who have. Listen to the person in whose ward it is, who knows the area best and everything around it. Really listen to them when you're making up your mind, and listen very hard to those who did go on the site visit. And if, of course, you really, really aren't sure, then you can always abstain. You'll never get a situation where every single person goes on every site visit. So that's my advice.
Okay, I think we've discussed this as far as we can here. We're going to move on to item 12, which is exclusion of public and press. No reason? Indeed, in which case, can I thank all officers and members for coming along tonight and close the meeting at 25 minutes to 8. Thank you very much.